This doesn't feel like protection. It feels like abandonment. When everyone tells you that God stepped in for your good, but your heart is still reaching for what He took away. When the silence feels heavier than the noise ever did, and the space where they used to be echoes with questions you're afraid to ask out loud. If God was protecting you, why does every morning feel like waking up to loss? Why does your peace feel more distant than it ever was when they were here? This is the question that haunts quiet moments and keeps you staring at your phone, wondering if divine intervention is supposed to hurt this much. And this is where most people misunderstand what God was doing. You didn't imagine the shift. That sudden distance that felt like ice where warmth used to live. The conversations that became shorter. The responses that took longer. The feeling that something sacred was slowly being pulled from your hands. You weren't asking for too much when you wanted clarity. You weren't being dramatic when you felt the ground moving beneath what you thought was solid. This wasn't because you failed to pray hard enough, love better, or hold on tighter. The ache in your chest when you realized they were slipping away wasn't weakness. It was your heart recognizing that something it had learned to need was being quietly removed. You felt the change before you could name it. The way their attention felt different. How their presence carried a new kind of distance. How conversations that once flowed like rivers suddenly felt like you were drawing water from an empty well. And the hardest part wasn't losing them. It was not understanding why. But here's what you couldn't see while your heart was breaking. God was moving in the spaces between your prayers and their responses. He was working in the silence you mistook for abandonment. While you were holding on, He was gently loosening your grip. Not because your love was wrong, but because your attachment had become a chain. God saw what love blinded you to. He watched how your peace disappeared when they were distant, and how your joy became dependent on their attention. He saw how your prayers shifted from seeking Him to seeking them through Him. Your heart had found a home in someone who was never meant to be your foundation. God didn't step in because they were evil or because you were naive. He stepped in because love without wisdom becomes bondage, and devotion without discernment becomes idolatry. He blocked what your heart couldn't release. He created distance where your emotions had created dependency. Separation wasn't punishment, it was restraint. Like a parent who gently removes a treasured toy that has become an obsession, God removed access to what your heart had made essential. The closed doors weren't rejection, they were redirection. The unanswered calls weren't abandonment, they were intervention. God didn't take something from you, He took something off you. This is why protection hurt before it brought peace. Your heart was attached to what your spirit knew wasn't safe. The anxiety you felt wasn't your intuition failing. It was your soul recognizing that something was misaligned. When God protects, He doesn't always remove the danger first. Sometimes, He removes you from your willingness to walk toward it. Your peace didn't disappear because God was absent. Your peace was being guarded from something that would have destroyed it entirely. The restlessness you felt wasn't a sign that you needed to fight harder for them. It was a sign that your heart was being prepared for something better. God protects clarity before He protects comfort. He will disturb your false peace to give you true peace. He will interrupt your temporary joy to preserve your lasting joy. The distance that felt cruel was actually kindness. The silence that felt cold was actually space for your heart to remember its true source. Your anxiety wasn't weakness, it was warning. Your unrest wasn't punishment, it was preparation. This is where God's protection finally becomes clear, when the fog of longing lifts and you can see the landscape of your life without them in it. You begin to understand. The peace that felt so far away starts returning, not because you've forgotten them, but because you've remembered yourself. The clarity that was clouded by attachment begins to sharpen. You start to see how much of your emotional energy was spent trying to secure something that was never meant to be secured. How much of your prayer life had become negotiating with God instead of trusting Him. The freedom feels strange at first, like learning to breathe deeply after months of holding your breath. But it's real freedom. Freedom from the constant wondering, the endless analyzing, the emotional roller coaster that disguised itself as love. God doesn't remove what's meant to stay. What left wasn't your future. It was the obstruction. The protection you couldn't feel in the moment becomes the foundation of peace you stand on now. And in this quiet space, you finally understand that sometimes God's greatest mercy looks like His greatest mystery. Protection often feels like loss until the danger passes. Often feels like loss until the danger passes. But what you couldn't see in those moments was the invisible war being fought over your peace. While you were questioning why God felt distant, He was actually drawing closer to shield you from what you couldn't recognize as danger. The person you were holding on to wasn't just emotionally unavailable. They were emotionally unsafe. Not because they were intentionally cruel, but because they carried patterns that would have slowly eroded the very peace you were trying to protect by keeping them close. Your heart had become so focused on maintaining connection that it stopped discerning the cost of that connection. Every conversation left you more anxious than settled. Every interaction required you to shrink parts of yourself to avoid conflict. Every day with them demanded more emotional energy than it returned. But love has a way of making us blind to imbalance. It convinces us that giving more will eventually create the stability we crave. God saw what your heart refused to acknowledge. He watched how your confidence wavered in their presence. He noticed how your prayers became petitions for their approval rather than conversations with Him. He observed how your peace became conditional on their mood, their attention, their validation. The anxiety you felt wasn't random. It was your spirit recognizing that something essential was being compromised. Your unrest wasn't a character flaw. It was an alarm system trying to wake you up to what your emotions had grown too attached to see. God didn't create the distance to hurt you. He created the distance to save you from a slow spiritual suffocation you had learned to call love. The doors that closed weren't punishment for caring too much. They were intervention before you lost yourself completely in someone who couldn't even find themselves. This is the mystery of divine protection. It doesn't always feel protective in the moment. Sometimes it feels like the very thing you need most is being pulled from your hands. But God operates on a timeline your heart cannot see. He removes access to what would eventually remove your peace. He blocks paths that lead away from your purpose. He creates separation when your soul has become too entangled to separate itself. The person you're missing isn't missing you the same way. While you've been wondering what went wrong, they've been relieved by the distance. While you've been trying to bridge the gap, they've been grateful for the space. This isn't because you loved wrong. It's because you loved someone incapable of receiving love at the depth you offered it. The reason you still miss them isn't because you lost something precious. It's because you're finally free from something that was slowly consuming your peace. God's protection doesn't always announce itself with relief. Sometimes it whispers through the ache of release. What felt like abandonment was actually rescue. What looked like loss was actually liberation. If this message brought clarity to confusion you've been carrying, know that God's timing in your life is perfect, even when it doesn't feel protective. Trust His quiet interventions, because sometimes the greatest mercy comes disguised as the deepest mystery.